I guess my first question would be, can you just give a quick introduction of yourself and just tell us what you do?
Sure. So my name is Brian Furness. I am primarily a heavy equipment operator. I've been in the construction industry for about 10 to 12 years now. Now I actually am a content creator. I have a YouTube channel that focuses on getting people into the skilled trades, specifically heavy equipment operating. But primarily, I was a heavy equipment operator for about 8 years. And then I sold heavy equipment for about 2 years before really pursuing the YouTube channel. So.
And then I guess my follow up would be, just on a typical day, what does a heavy equipment operator do from start to finish?
Sure. So on a typical day, your typical day is going to start. You should be on the job by about 7 or 7:30, depending on your employer. You're going to start by checking over the machine to, checking your oil, hydraulic levels, your coolant levels, all of the regular wear items on the machine to make sure it's in good working order. And then while the machine is warming up, you're going to be greasing the machine. You have to go through all of the moving parts and use a grease gun to put grease on everything. And then you move into your tasks for the day. And that's really going to depend on what piece of equipment you run. I ran the longest piece of equipment I spent time in was a wheel loader, and I ran for a pipe crew. So my job was to supply that crew with whatever they needed, whether it was stone or sand or pipe or any of the other materials. It was my job to go and run and get those materials. And then because I was the loader operator, you also have some additional responsibilities and you're kind of responsible for the logistics of that job. So anytime we had trucks delivering stone or sand, any of our materials, it was my job to tell them where to dump, where it was going to be out of the way, but it was going to be close enough that I could access that quickly. And it was the same for pipe, the structures, the actual concrete vaults that we put in the ground. All of that was my responsibility to place and have everything strung out so that when the excavator operator got there, all he had to do was turn around behind him and grab it and put it in the hole. So that was kind of my overview of what I did as a loader operator. And generally, I'm in the north where we have about a 6 month, 6 to 6.5 month window to work. So we work pretty long hours, and our days would generally wrap up around 7:30 or so in the evening.
Right. Okay. So my next follow up would be about how many hours a week do people in this field generally work?
Sure. So that one's hard to generalize just because there is some variation in the industry. So we'll start at one end of the spectrum. If you were to work for a small to mid-sized company that was really family oriented, and the boss liked being home too, you're probably on the low side going to work 50 to 55 hours a week. So you will have a regular 5 day work week, but instead of doing, kind of a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5 gig, it's more likely going to be a 7 to 7:30 in the morning to around 6 or so in the evening. And that would be 5 days a week. If you step up to your large civil contractors, which is going to be guys that build roads, airports, some of your large scale projects that are on tight deadlines, now you're starting to get into some pretty serious hours. Generally, you're going to start again 7 to 7:30 in the morning, but you probably are going to work to 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, especially in the north where you have that short work season. Most likely, you will be working 6 days a week, if not seven, depending on the company. So you're probably closer to anywhere from 70 to 80 hours a week at one of those companies. So it's hard to generalize because there is some variation there.
Right. So you'd say the work life balance generally is dependent on the size of the company that you're working for?
It's partially going to be dependent upon that, and then it's also going to be partially dependent upon what area of the country you're from. So I'm originally from Texas. It's a much warmer climate, so you can work pretty much year round. Those companies, while they will still push the hours on projects that they have a tight deadline, it's not so much trying to beat the winter like it is up here in the north. I currently reside in Michigan, and so it's always a big push to get the project finished before winter hits. And so you're generally working some crazy hours during the summer. There's really not a home life. You're literally, from before the sun gets up, most of the time I would leave my house about 4:30 or 5 in the morning to be able to get on site on time. And then by the time I drove home, it was anywhere from 8:30 to 10 o'clock, depending on the night. So there's not during the work season, there's not a whole lot of home life. But again, here in the north, we get the layoff in the winter, and that's generally around the last couple weeks in October to mid-November. You get laid off for the season, so you are no longer working. They tell you go ahead and stay home. You actually get on unemployment and draw unemployment over those months because you're not working, knowing that you will go back to work for the same company the following spring. Generally, here the work season kicks off around late March to early April. And so for people like me, I would save for the layoff. And so I would sit at home, and it was nothing but family life, for the 5 months or so that I sat at home.
Right. Okay. So my next follow-up would be just specifically for your union, are there any internships or apprenticeships that are offered?
Yes. So there's two ways you can kind of get into the industry. We'll start with the union because I'm in a union state. If you are in a union state, they offer an apprenticeship. The most difficult step in the apprenticeship is getting into the apprenticeship because there's only so many positions open. COVID, believe it or not, has actually caused an issue with the apprenticeship program because they didn't accept any apprentices in a lot of locations this year because of the virus. But there's so many slots. You take a kind of initial test to get in. It's kind of basic arithmetic. I don't remember if it's got trigonometry on it or not, but it's kind of a basic skill set to make sure that you've got at least kind of a high school education, that you're going to be able to read and write and do basic math on the job. Once you've passed that, they've gone over your resume and they accept you into the program. It's a 4-year apprenticeship program and involves both classroom time as well as on-site time. They do help place you with companies that know that you are an apprentice. So they give you apprentice-oriented jobs. They don't expect you to go out there and know everything. It's more focused on getting you educated on the job. So that's kind of the apprenticeship side. If you want to get in not through the union, the best way to do it is just apply to companies local around you. And a lot of them, if you're willing to get on the end of a shovel and work, they have no problem training you. And that's kind of a secondary way to get into the industry.
Right. Okay. So my next question would be, when you became a heavy equipment operator, did you receive on-the-job training? Is that something that's commonly available to people who want to join this field?
Yeah, so I would say the vast majority of people getting into this trade actually get all of their training via on the job training. I'm kind of a good case study for this question because my dad was white collar. He is in the banking industry as a bank consultant. I was always drawn to the trades. I always loved construction equipment. And so I think I was about 25. I decided I was going to apply at a company to drive an off road haul truck, which is one of the big dump trucks. And the orientation was the hiring coordinator brought me out to a job site on a weekend when it was shut down and threw me in the cab and said, can you run this? And after we drove around for 15 minutes and I didn't wreck anything, he said, okay, you're hired. And that was the extent of any initial training I got. Outside of that, it was talking to the other drivers, it was talking to other operators, it was watching what other people were doing on the job site. I literally didn't even know where I was supposed to go. I had no experience. And so all of the experience really comes from on the job training. That's part of the problem the industry has right now with a lot of the tech schools and the vocational schools that have heavy equipment operator programs is they teach you how to pull the sticks in the machine, but they don't really teach you anything about construction. They don't teach you about how roads are built or how bridges are put in or how pipe is put in the ground. And so all of that training is going to come from on the job training.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what educational background do people in this career generally have? Is there a sort of, kind of set path, or can you do multiple sort of things to get into this career?
Yeah. So if you just want to get into, this, I actually have conversations with guys a fair amount that are looking to get into the trade, but aren't really sure.
Right.
And what I kind of tell them is ultimately it depends on where you want to go with your career. If your goal is to just operate equipment, um, straight out of high school, just start applying at companies and absolutely get into the trade. The trade right now especially is just dying for people, so the hurdles are super low to get in, and you really don't need more than a high school education. If you want to progress up the food chain down the road, I personally would still recommend right out of high school going into the field and getting that seat time as a heavy equipment operator, getting the shovel time as a laborer, and really getting all of that experience. And then if you want to pursue it beyond that, moving up into, maybe you wanted to be a project manager, or something that transitions over into the office side, generally you're only going to need a degree in construction management, which, if I recall, most schools, that's a 2-year program. A lot of times you can do it taking night courses. So it's something that once you're already in the field, especially if you have a company that's kind of backing you on that, they will absolutely work with you on making sure you're able to get off of the job in time, that you can make it to your night classes and you can get that degree, because ultimately they would like to promote within as opposed to going with an outside hire. They're going to be willing to work with you on that.
Right, right. So would you say that for the most part, a 4-year degree wouldn't be required, like from a college?
No, 100%. No, the 4-year degree is not required. Not even an associate's. Literally coming straight out of high school, there's, I don't even know what number to put on it. I would say probably 30 to 40% of the, that might be a little high. 20 to 30% of the industry doesn't even have a completed high school education. Not that I would recommend that, just because it does kind of box you in some ways. But there really is not an education requirement, because of the fact that so much of this industry is on the job training. So you don't really get anything out of a classroom setting that's going to help you materially out in the field.
Okay, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think my next question was just what is something that most people don't know when they start this profession?
So there's two things that most people don't really get when they start this profession. Is first, the number of hours that you're going to work, especially during the summer months. It's a lot of hours, and a lot of people,
Right.
especially young people that don't really have any feel for the industry, they just don't realize what those hours look like. When you're 6 or 7 days a week, and you're 5 or 6 weeks in, working 10 to 12 hours, sometimes 14-hour days, it's mentally taxing. And I don't think they really grasp that offhand. Um, Excuse me again. I apologize. I just had dinner before this interview. So, um, but the second thing I will say is, this is not an industry that gives you many pats on the back. And when you are corrected, it's generally in the form of someone yelling and swearing at you. And um, a lot of people coming into the industry take that personally, like the foreman hates me, and they get their feelings hurt. And believe me, I did that in the very beginning too. It's like, why does this guy hate me so much? But you have to understand, like, that's the way the industry communicates. It's getting much better. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be, but a lot of people just don't realize you have to come into this industry with a very thick skin. You can't get your feelings hurt. And you have to realize that someone yelling at you doesn't mean you are a terrible employee and you need to go crawl in a hole somewhere. It's just, that's the way the industry corrects and trains. So,
Right, right. So just building off the idea of thick skin, just at a physical level, do you think this job is risky? And is there, hazard pay that's offered?
uh, yes, it is a very risky job. I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about giant pieces of iron that are moving around, and especially when you start getting on the large job sites, you have excavators and bulldozers that are the size of a small house. There are a ton of blind spots around those machines. In fact, I want to say it was about a month and a half or so ago, there was an article that just came out of two people that were killed in a mine because they had their pickup truck, like, we're talking a full size pickup truck, and it was parked in an area that a dozer was backing up. And because of the size of the blind spot on the machine, the bulldozer completely flattened the truck and killed the two people inside the truck. That's just part of the industry. You also have things like trench collapses that kills, I don't even know how many people a year, but it's not a small number. That's just, you're in the ground, and as much as the conditions, there's always that strange thing that can happen where something collapses, and you're talking about a ton of, literally a ton, 2,000 pounds of dirt falling on you, from 6 feet above your head. you don't have a chance to get out. So there are definitely risks in the industry. It's not a, I would not call this a safe industry. But with things like OSHA, it's gotten far better. I think the industry as a whole is getting much better about being safety oriented as opposed to just production oriented.
Right.
As far as hazard pay goes, in super extenuating circumstances, you might have some sort of hazard pay, but generally speaking, no, that's just one of the risks that you take on when you hire into this industry is you're going into it knowing that you kind of are responsible for your own safety at the end of the day.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So just at a logistical level, how do promotions generally work, and are they often?
Yeah, so generally speaking, it's going to be promotion out of the field. So if you do a really good job, not only operating your piece of equipment, but also taking care of the equipment, and then kind of where you separate the potential leaders from the rest of the pack is if you don't have to call your foreman every 20 minutes because you ran into some little stumbling block that you need someone to give you the pat on the back to make a decision to go forward. Obviously, this is assuming you know what you need to do going forward because you're not going to get pats on the back for screwing up. But if you know the process, you know what needs to happen, and you're able to start preemptively making calls on the ground without calling your foreman, generally that's kind of where you start to separate yourself and you will over time be promoted to a foreman. A foreman is someone who is going to be over a somewhat small crew. Um, and again, that depends on the company. These are kind of foreman and superintendent are two terms that often get intermingled, and it's not really clear depending on the company you're at. But generally speaking, a foreman is going to be over, call it a 6 to 8 man crew, and you will have one specific task like laying pipe. You're responsible for putting in the storm pipe on this job. And there will be another crew that is responsible for prepping the road base and doing all of your undercuts. Um, and then you from there step up to a superintendent role, which is more big picture over the whole job. And all of those promotions are generally going to happen from guys in the field. In fact, I want to say that pretty much every superintendent I ever worked for had at one point in time either been a laborer or an operator.
Right. So would you say that the superintendent is kind of just the highest level position in this field for the most part?
So your superintendent's going to be the highest level position in the field. From there, you step up to a project manager, which is generally going to be more of an that while they do spend time out in the field, it's going to generally be more of an office oriented position.
Right.
And that's really where you cross that threshold to where you do probably need a construction management degree to start getting into that side of the business. But yeah, superintendent would probably be your top guy on the job site, actively in the field every day.
Right. Okay. I think my next question would be just in general, would you say that this is a stable career? And can someone expect to hold this job for many years without getting worried?
Sure. So, as much as I would love to say 100% yes, there is one part of construction that you just kind of have to accept. And it's the fact that this is an industry that is entirely dependent upon the economy. If you think about it, as soon as there is any sort of economic decline, the first thing that happens is companies start canceling new building projects. People stop building arenas, housing development stop. I mean, everything kind of puts on the brakes. So now that being said, there are aspects of the industry that will continue through economic downturn. For instance, doing government contracts. The government's always spending money on new construction projects, whether it's municipal buildings or road work. Highways are always needing to be replaced. Roads are constantly needing to be repaired. So you can kind of get into certain sectors of the industry that will safeguard you a little bit from that. Um, but you just always have to keep in the back of your mind that if there is a large economic downturn, construction is one that just suffers. Now, that being said, as long as the economy is clipping along, this is a super stable job. Especially these days, the industry is in a very unique position because college has been pushed so hard. The skilled trades are dying for people, and I don't want to, I don't want to feel like I'm kind of exaggerating there.
Mhm.
The industry is literally starving for people. And so I would say long term, it's going to be a long time before that gap really gets met, which is going to ultimately provide more stability to people in the industry because they're just, it's not like it's saturated with people and you're one of 15 people they could lay off. At this point in time, they're hurting so bad for operators that even in an economic downturn, there's a decent chance that they're going to be able to find work and they're going to be able to keep you at least somewhat working.
Right. Okay. And I think my final couple of questions were just related to how a high schooler would sort of kind of get into this career. So I think the first one was um, how would a high schooler just get started in this career? You know, just from
Sure.
graduation.
So that's the beautiful thing about this industry. Go apply. I mean, it is that simple. I can tell you if you are in high school and thinking about getting into the trades, and this is outside of even heavy equipment, if you're thinking about getting into carpentry or to welding or any of the skilled trades, I know there's a lot of high schools, not all, but a lot of high schools that offer some extracurricular programs that are geared towards the trades. I can't even, I think my brother-in-law was in one of those programs. They called it Skill Center. And for so many hours or half a day, a couple times a week, he would actually go out on a framing crew and work on a framing, framing up a house. Um, there, if you can get into those sort of programs, those look really good on a resume for a recent high school graduate wanting to get into the trades. Another possibility is instead of going and getting a job at a fast food joint, go see if you can get a job with a landscaper or a framing crew or some sort of outdoor activity, because that's one of the things people look for especially recently graduated high school students is, excuse me, can you handle working outside in the elements, in the heat or in the rain, in the cold, and having some prior job experience in some field that is outdoors will significantly help you. But really that's, I mean, that's it. You literally from the day you graduate can go apply for these companies. And a lot of companies right now have a preference towards teaching new people because they don't have bad habits. They're, most people, especially coming right out of high school, are already in a mindset that they are very teachable. And that's really advantageous to a company.
Right. I think that's really awesome that you can kind of just get started right away after graduation.
It's
Uh,
fantastic. It's a
yeah.
really, really quick way. And this, the most amazing part, I'll give you a prime example. When I hired in at the heavy civil company, I hired in with a kid that was, I think he was either 19 or 20. We both hired in and got into the union. We were given our journeyman cards. He was going to, had he stuck it out, he was going to comfortably make about $85,000 that year just from that work season at 20 years old. So
Wow.
that's the other thing too, is your earning potential. Mind you, this is all dependent upon where in the country you're at and what the wages are in your area. But for our area here, you're talking right out of high school, you could potentially be making, easily over $75,000 a year right out of the gate.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah, it's awesome. So
I think my final question was just, is there anything else that you think is important for someone who's interested in pursuing this career and anything that they should know?
yeah, the biggest thing I can tell anyone is it's hard work. It is, don't get me wrong, it is an absolute blast running the equipment. You get to do some really cool things. You get to see some pretty incredible equipment. Um, But at the end of the day, this is the skilled trades. It is a physical job. Even when you're running equipment, you're bouncing around. It's strenuous on your body. A lot of operators have back problems because you're constantly looking over your shoulder and you're constantly getting beat to pieces in the equipment. This is a physically demanding job. And if you really want to pursue this, you need to go into it realizing that, it's not something where at 5 o'clock the whistle dings and you get to go home. You're there until the foreman says you're done for the day. And you have to be willing to go into it with that mindset that I'm going to make really good money, but I'm going to work my butt off for that money. And
Right.
if you can kind of get behind that and be prepared for that, it is a very, very rewarding career because at the end of the day, here locally, I can go to a dozen different locations around lower Michigan, and we can drive on a road that I materially helped build. I can point to drains in the road that I put in, and that's what's keeping that road from flooding. So that is a really rewarding aspect of this industry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that was
Sure.
my final question. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and doing this interview. And I know a lot of my classmates are really going to appreciate this.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, before we started recording, um, the skilled trades have really fallen to the wayside, and college has been pushed so hard. I think it's incredible that you guys are doing this. I think it's such a great idea. More schools need to be adopting this mentality of kind of at least exposing people to the trades and giving it a fair and honest look, as opposed to kind of couching it as the alternative to college if you can't make it. So no, I'm really grateful that I get to be a part of this. This is great.
Thank you so much.